Welcome to the Funnel Reboot Podcast with your host, Glenn Schmeltzley. Let's get into today's show.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the show for analytically minded marketers. Why don't we head straight into today's show? In the world of capitalism, things that are rare are valuable. Macallan single malt scotch. Mint Joe Dimaggio rookie card. Vintage Patek Philippe. A Stradivarius. Japanese Wagyu steak, a suit from a Savile Row tailor, an original Worhal painting, a made-to-order Rolls Royce Phantom. These can even extend to digital assets, like the domain Tesla.com, which the original registrant sold to the car company in 2014 for $11 million. We can add another item that's limited. Arguably, it's a one-of-a-kind. But, just like all other goods with high sticker prices, opportunists have attempted to mass-produce this thing, commoditizing it. Their idea has been to make it common enough and thus cheap enough to be sold every day in a large marketplace. The valuable resource that each of us has, of course, is time. About 200 years ago, it became a measured thing. And it was called attention. And ever since, the price it's assigned has been paced by the number of places where media can be shown. In the present day, with a prolific amount of media-friendly technology all around us, there's almost no place where they can't vie for our attention. And this is bad for consumers. But today's guest points out how it's not just bad for them, it's bad for advertisers too. He says that bad actors in particular, those who are unscrupulous about what ads they show and how frequently they show them, are spoiling this for the rest of us. The excessive amount of messages aimed at consumers is undermining their ability to mentally absorb them, decreasing the effectiveness of all advertising, eroding its own base. And taken to the extreme, the cheapening of consumer attention could harm the internet as a whole. A book by Tim Hwang called The Subprime Attention Crisis points out that many information websites we all rely on are ad-supported. And the less revenue coming in, the less viable these publishers become. Our guest is someone who brings a conscientious view to this because of his background working with notable leaders in the marketing technology space. And he's someone who now runs his own media company. He is the CEO of the MarTech Weekly, also known as TMW. It is a resource that is read by leading marketing and technology executives in over 65 countries. He also hosts the MarTech World Forum, an international gathering of world leaders in marketing tech. And he's a contributor to the Making Sense of MarTech podcast. So we're heading to Melbourne, Australia, to speak with Juan Mendoza. Juan Mendoza, welcome to Funnel Reboot.
Hey, great to be here.
Thank you so much. So I'm sure many know you, Juan, but the thing that you have been known for has been working in the field of MarTech, chronicling it, talking about it, being someone who is showing up every week, showing us what's changing in it, and more recently, you've inaugurated a set of awards around leaders in that category. So marketing technology, MarTech for short, is certainly something that you know well. You have a ringside seat for it. You see, as we have, all seen how many tools have been growing in this space. And I would expect you to be the loudest of cheerleaders for all of this technology. Now, you also are a writer, and I came across a piece that you wrote recently, which sounded a different note there. Could you please tell me about it and tell me about why you would be the person to write it?
Oh, well, thank you, Glenn. That's a fantastic introduction and very kind of you to say that. So I guess it's interesting, right? Thinking about the optimism that surrounds technology and the ideas that we tend to believe when we work in the marketing technology industry. So I think the article that you're referring to is called Inflating Attention.
Yes.
And I guess I open up that article. You can go check it out at themartechweekly.com. It's free to read for all subscribers. But the quote I kind of start with is from a gentleman. His name is Soren Kierkegaard. He wrote in 1843. He said that since boredom advances and boredom is the root of all evil, no wonder then that the world goes backwards, that evil spreads. This can be traced back to the very beginning of the world. The gods were bored, therefore they created human beings. And that's a kind of quote you probably wouldn't put in front of a tech analysis commentary article, would you? But it's relevant because one thing that tech has done, which marketers should definitely be paying attention to, is that technology has almost certainly eliminated boredom. We are no longer bored people. If you have a smartphone in hand, you have a billion things to look at and to entertain you until you enter the grave. And so I start with that premise, and then the article is all about the concept of attention and the incentives and the mechanics in the tech industry and how marketers use it, the tech industry, to drive attention from people. And of course, marketers are all about attention. They're all about collecting that attention, forcing it, squeezing it, using it, pushing it through a funnel in order to get a sale, in order to get someone to sign up for something. And so I kind of looked at attention as this topic and thinking about how much has our attention actually changed in the tech industry, and is it actually a good thing or not? And so that's where I started with the article.
And I just want to underline this. You are someone who, because of the MarTech Weekly, you also have business needs. You have an imperative for income, like most of us do. And you are in the fray along with us. You're not some ivory tower academic who is looking down upon this over the top of their nose, trying to tell us how to do our things. You also live by the same realities we do.
I mean, I guess I started in working in startups and trying to build things like, how does Salesforce integrate with Shopify, and, how do you send emails out of MailChimp, and, I got started with a very tactical, hands-on perspective on MarTech. And then as my career grew, I ended up working more with enterprise companies, and they were asking increasingly, when you've got millions of dollars for budgets in marketing tech, they're asking more philosophical questions, like what does the future of retailing in the next 5 years? How do we know that the time that customers spend on our apps and services is good time, And so I kind of increasingly, as we went down this sort of path, and my career grew into more sort of senior leadership roles, the questions changed. Like the tactical day-to-day minutiae of integrating stuff and building emails is really not on the radar of most leaders that, for example, like heads of digital and CMOs, they're really thinking about, number one, if you're getting that far down in your career, say you spent 10 years working in marketing tech, the number one thing a lot of people think about is, wow, are the things that I focused on in this industry, are they still going to be around in a couple years? There's a very deep-seated underlying anxiety in our industry because it moves and changes so quickly around, wow, will this stuff actually still be around? Will I have a job? Have I wasted the past 10 years? Even look at third-party cookie deprecation. How many careers is that going to destroy? Because same concept with data management platforms. Very hot topic back in 2015 through to 2019, and then it declined, and now CDPs are the main thing. What happened if you spent
Yes.
5-6 years investing your whole career into learning DMPs? So I think, as I've grown in my own career, I had the same anxiety and the same thoughts around, well, where do I actually invest my time if the industry's changing so much? And I guess out of that was the Martech Weekly was born, because I said, well, probably the best defense for that is to actually pay attention to what's going on in the industry. How is it shifting? What's going
Right.
on from a tech level? What's going on at a government and regulatory level? How are the major platforms changing how the internet works? And so I kind of almost started as as career insurance to know,
Yep.
well, where is all this stuff going? And it's also the double-edged sword on this. It's also equally as fascinating interrogating the industry. And I believe most people would be well served at actually taking a good, long, hard look once in a while at how the industry is changing, because it's incredibly important.
So I'll just pick up from that word interrogating. So yeah, I do see what you're doing with an article like this, to be interrogating those of us who have, moved along as different tools have gone, but we've usually tried to set our, overall aim for companies, the value that we in our own careers offer, onto some KPI. And I think you would say that for those of us who haven't been deeply thinking about it, we've probably reverted to just making attention that KPI. And that we thought that as more people get onto the internet, as more people spend more of their time on the internet, 7 hours, I think is what you threw into the article, that we are simply there to, plow that field, to, mine those eyeballs. And the more of them that we can get in, the more the star on our career shines. And I think you're poking a big hole in that. Tell me where you see some of those holes in that thinking.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. My researcher, Keanu Taylor, he had a great way of thinking about this last week. He said that how countries, for example, the United States was at one point colonized and populated, and then the Western world expanded out. As those countries were colonized, things became more scarce over time. Try and buy a house in San Francisco. It's expensive, but it wasn't always expensive. There were times I came back from a trip late last year from Anaheim, California, where Disneyland is. And in my hotel was just a book about the history of Orange County and Anaheim and that area. And a lot of the story is, there's these two lawyers, they did some work, and their payment for their time was a massive plot of land down in Orange County, now worth maybe tens of millions of dollars, right? And this was back, in the 1800s. And so you kind of think about that concept of almost like gentrification, right? Like you can only expand out so far into land, and then over time that land becomes more expensive because there's more people, and it becomes more scarce. More people are competing for that land and that actual available space because it's physical. On the internet, it's a very different type of scarcity. It's a different type of expansion. We've almost hit our critical limit in terms of the amount of people that are actually online. We've got more than 5 billion people online now. That's almost the entire world is online. So we've been through 30 years of expansion where things have been relatively cheap, finding audiences, doing SEO, building a newsletter list or an email list, even doing advertising on Google and Facebook and other platforms has been relatively cheap because we've been expanding. So for our generation, the early days it's just as such as a couple lawyers in Orange County gets a block of land. For us, well, maybe things are changing now, but in the early days, a lot of people benefited just working online and building stuff online and having the access of all of this attention that hasn't been captured by other major platforms just yet. And so I really like what Keanu Taylor's saying there, because it's actually a great concept, because, you mentioned we spend about 7-8 hours online, and that's from our research. That's about 29% of our day is online, 29%, so 1/3 of your waking hours, your entire life, is spent online on some screen. If you look at the big picture and you times that by the amount of people that are online, there's 194 billion hours spent per day, right? 194 billion hours. That's a lot, right?
Yes.
It's a lot of time. However, the difference is that, now that we've hit this critical mass, the platforms, particularly the ones that have got that lion's share, the likes of Meta, the likes of Apple and Amazon and other major platforms, they're now fighting for attention. They know that the internet is not this infinitely expanding thing. There is a critical limit to how many people are online, and that 194 billion hours it has a cap. And so what we're going to start to see is this battle for attention, purely because we know that there's just a cap. That we can't, that 194 billion hours, it may go to 200 billion, but it can't kind of push past that ceiling at all.
Not to mention that because they are all multi-billion public companies, multi-billion-dollar public companies who have an imperative each quarter to raise their numbers, that it's in their interest and they will make every effort to raise the value of that increasingly scarce inventory. So they're not there to, try and make it easier for us to get to them. They are looking to us advertisers, frankly, as the chump in this equation, where, they're trying to see just how much of a tax they can make us pay in order to grab these eyeballs of attention. And it's that choice that we make, as I think you argue that it is a choice, to blindly chase attention metrics. As we stampede towards that, we sometimes lose sight of the fact that, well, there's good sorts and bad sorts of attention. There are better ad vehicles and worse ad vehicles for getting that attention. So yeah, let's talk about some of those and how you see this, fragmentation of where on the internet we would get this attention, and also the type of actual mind share that it's getting, for better or for worse, out of our buyers, just so that we're under no illusion here that attention is not attention is not attention. It's not all the same fungible thing. There are differences.
I agree with that sentiment, that attention is very different depending on where you're at. The attention I pay to my wife is very different to the attention I pay to a podcast. The attention I pay to my staff are very different from somebody that randomly messages me on LinkedIn. The attention paid it varies depending on every single context.
Yeah, you say that, like, if we go 100 years, attention, like you said with your wife, this would be just this notion that when you're in conversation with each other, that each of you is devoted with your time to what is being spoken about right then and there, and that we didn't quantify it. We knew what it was, but we left it vague, and that the modern, marketing ecosystem has made it this, click bound, page view bound, follower bound, metricized thing that, sure, it's concrete, it's measurable, but was it supposed to be?
I think the big lie of the internet is that we can really understand humans through clicks. And I say that in full love for my industry, and of course, and chase,
right?
and marketers are clearly, they're wanting to chase clicks. There's a lot of good in online measurement because it gives you, I guess, a greater visibility around your business performance and how things work with your website or your app or your paid media. And, there's a signal to that, right? However, there is this aspect where if you follow the data way too much, everyone ends up like Mr. Beast. The viral sensation that's getting hundreds of millions of YouTube views for every video. But the content is totally debased. All of the content, really, all of it is about winning money or putting people in some weird dystopian situation, like locking them in a room for 10 days. And Mr. Beast, as a creator, as somebody that is obviously, he's made a lot of money and he's been able to crack the code with YouTube, so to speak. The guy has spent his whole life learning the YouTube algorithm. tweaking every single thumbnail of of his videos, optimizing everything ruthlessly in order to drive as much attention as possible. Now, everyone looks at that, and the media coverages people like Mr. Beast and others, not just him, but others that ruthlessly follow the clicks, as folks that we should be admiring. Some recent surveys say that, young people, the careers that they're aspiring to are not like doctors and astronauts anymore. They're YouTube influencers, right? And fine, generations change and cultures change. However, chasing clicks leads us to perhaps, really debasing our own creative talents and our own way to meet people at a human level. If everything's a click, then there's certain things that's going to get clicks. In the old world, the news media used to say, if it bleeds, it leads, right? If there was a murder, if there was an accident, you put it on the front page and you're going to sell newspapers. The same principle applies today. But what we've been able to do is have the visibility into what people click on and what they like, and based on those clicks. And that does not necessarily lead any brand to a good direction. If you want a lot of attention, great, but it may not be the attention that drives a brand. It may not be an attention that builds a 100-year-old company that everyone loves and is passed down generations, if that's what you're after. It may get you a quick exit. It may help you build some sort of authority and influence. However, at the abandonment of creativity and the abandonment of the values of your brand, chasing clicks can lead into a very dark place.
And so, bringing it down to an individual marketer, he even have this choice, because they may see that if they were to follow those, clickbaity headlines, the newsjacking type things, the highly edited and fast-paced video content, yes, it might get them a promotion in the short term. But at what cost collectively are we harming, the public good that is the internet that we're all trying to use? It's you're asking very pointed questions, sometimes uncomfortable questions. And do you think that we are that we're able to kind of look out for that collective good? This is almost like a climate change conversation, but within marketing, because we each of us want to make our internal numbers. And if we realize that we could do it this way, as opposed to other ways, maybe if it had been left to us to invent the newspaper industry, maybe we would have all made, yellow journalism happen, but none of us would have built a, esteemed, well-reputed news organization like some of them that are around today. It's a tough question.
It's a tough question. And I'm not saying that the large platforms are really at fault here. I'm saying that, large platforms, like Google search, for example, one platform, one product has unlocked untold billions of dollars, possibly trillions of dollars over the years for small businesses of all shapes and sizes to start and find customers. There has been so much good, but we must balance it with how much, really asking the question, how much it is actually degrading discourse. Scott Galloway's good way of saying this is that, our discourse is becoming more coarse because of the incentives of algorithms and the incentive of, as I said before, if it bleeds, it leads, right? So folks that want to, another example perhaps to use is that when you see a car accident on the highway, on the other side of the highway, why does your side of the highway
rubberneck?
Everyone wants to have a good look at all the pain, suffering, and blood and misery on the other side, And so, there is those sort of base instincts in which you can really leverage to get attention. But I think there's an antidote to this. I actually think that there's a way to escape a lot of this sort of metrics, click-based thinking in marketing, which is just to be almost rigorously original, come up with ideas and pursue them. And sometimes you have to forsake the data. You have to say the data is wrong, or you say we're going to completely ignore the data in order to pursue an idea. And that's for someone that works in MarTech, where the mantra that we all talk to ourselves is, the data is always the main thing we should go back to. It's actually pretty difficult to say that, because in reality, that's what a lot of marketers stake their career on, is the metrics. But I would say that there's an element of this where you have to actually ignore the metrics. If you really want to come up with original ideas are the things that can completely change an industry. And over the years with the Martech Weekly, I've seen a handful of fantastic marketing technologies come up with original ideas for their content and they talk to the industry. And they've actually been able to change hearts and minds and shift the industry into a new direction. The classic example I use time and time again is Mark Benioff from Salesforce, surprisingly, right? He was in San Francisco with picket signs, literally walking around saying, the era of software is dead. We have to embrace the cloud. And that was a hypothesis. That was a philosophy around how people use tech. And it completely shifted the industry. And look where Salesforce is now. You look at Salesforce.
And he did that in 1999 when, shrink-wrapped packaged software was having a heyday.
Yeah, he's like one of our early technology colonizers, right? And they may make statues of them and then they'll probably pull it down at some point. However, but I guess what I'm trying to tell you is that like Benioff is not so much a tech CEO, but he is a philosopher and high priest of technology. That's the way to think about him, because he had original ideas and he continued to have original ideas. Like one little fact that I find fascinating was that he actually advised Steve Jobs on building the iPhone App Store, because Salesforce developed the Salesforce App Exchange before the iPhone came to. And so you ask, and so you look at people like that, and they're our philosophers of this age. They're thinking, what are the tech shifts and how do they influence society? And so thinking at that level, at the worldview level, is extremely hard to do for most marketers. But you really need to get there if you want to have a brand that people not just buy stuff from, but they love and they believe in your vision, and they'll do anything for you to make that vision a reality. And that's where you want to get to with your content. You don't want to get people just clicking on stuff or, mindlessly scrolling through a feed. You want to create movements. You want to create the ability for people to believe in something and know that they're making a positive impact on the world. And so, that vision is so much different from a Mr. Beast vision, which is empty calories, really. Driving attention and clicks at all costs.
I want to get more into how you see, that solution working. And I want to bring back this notion that you raised in the article of inflation, which I think proves conclusively that we don't have a choice about this. But before we do that, we're going to take a quick break. Let me step away for a second to note on social, you'll see show-related updates about our guests. You'll see what's happening behind the scenes. Or you can simply talk to me. And I've really loved how lately a few of you have posted positive comments about the show. It encourages me in making this podcast the best it can be. So find Funnel Reboot on LinkedIn or Instagram or X. Click follow and maybe say hi. Thanks a lot. Let's get back to the show. So Juan, you had brought up inflation as, something very important in this. And, when we think about that currency and things getting devalued, if we imagine that attention is the currency that, whether we like it or not, we've settled on to, to measure marketing by. You point out that there are some big things that have come along just because we've been so maniacally obsessed with this currency. And there are your pickpockets and your, grifters that have come along to take this, obsession of ours and profit by it. So, you tell me maybe who you think some of those might be, where the perpetrators are.
The perpetrators of the internet economy are the perpetrators of, I guess, the situation we're in, where everything is chasing clicks. It's
and the fact that we've got a dispersed ad ecosystem where we can't tell actually where a click happened. So many middlemen.
Yeah, I would say that unfortunately, I think it's just a product of human nature. I don't think there are perpetrators. I think that a lot of what we're seeing today is the buildup of a lot of significant history. Even democratic capitalism is a massive part of this economy. We've got tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of years of human psychology that feeds into this, which I think we should think about a lot more in the sense that it's easy to blame people, right? Like it's easy to blame Mark Zuckerberg for building a huge attention monopoly and basically gamifying it and turning it into a lottery and getting all our teenagers are depressed and addicted to their iPhone and Instagram feeds. It's easy to blame him. Like, it's easy to blame these folks, but really they're working within a framework. They're working within a capitalistic framework. They're working in financial incentives. A lot of these major platforms are public companies. They have shareholders to keep, they keep happy. And I would say that we really are at the early days of a lot of this. The internet is barely 30 years old. Most of what we're seeing today is roughly 10, 15 years old. And so I would look at it and say, well, we're all stumbling in the dark. We really don't know what we're doing at all. And that's totally fine. I think it's fine. But I think that, I think there will be eventually a renaissance, so to speak. And we were speaking off the mic on this, a sidebar around the renaissance, or a renaissance, I think, so to speak, of humanity, and understanding that the internet should serve humans, not metrics. And I think people will increasingly want to see that. A lot of the mental health research that's been coming out, particularly in the media.
Yeah.
It's I would say that, we're looking at a situation where we're starting to see the unintended effects of all this amazing technology that's changed the world. And who knows when it will come. But like I said before, we got to tear down the statue of Mark Benioff at some point, I guess.
We may have that renaissance, but we must first be cognizant of how we are allowing these things like bot farms and made for advertising sites to grow, because we're feeding them. We are more than happy if we say that someone's eyeballs can be monetized. Multiply. Well, if you can't tell that it was a person or a bot at the other side, and we are not seeking that human connection, we ourselves are participating in that fraud of giving just money to people who say that they found, a click or an impression on the other side of that, where what we could probably be insisting on instead is deeper engagement. An understanding, and there may even be measurements that we could find that help us get beyond just saying, well, I got an impression and, those are all the same to me. I'm not going to distinguish. This kind of, the fact that we are in the frenzy and we're causing it, it also, I think, has repercussions on us. You brought up John Naughton's law. I'd love you to share that. I didn't know of him, but I've heard for a while of Andrew Chen's law, what he calls the law of shitty click-throughs. So, we will see that. But, tell us what the follow-on effect of us even being in this game is doing to us as marketers.
Yeah, I think John Naughton has got a fantastic article. It's called the enshittification of the internet. He's probably coined that word, enshittification. It's very academic, isn't it? But I guess his article around that has been very popular in the industry, particularly around analysts, because it's thinking about a lot of these platforms, and what we're actually starting to see now with third-party cookie deprecation is this fight for attention. And so, all of these major platforms, Google, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, etc., they're all building network effects, right? And those network effects keep you in. Like, for example, like I've recently just broke up with Twitter/X, and I realized my career, people, there's no one there anymore, but the network effect pool of just staying connected with people there is so powerful, so they've figured out a really interesting flaw in human psychology when it comes to network effects and belonging. And they've sort of ruthlessly optimized that to the extremes now. And so, once you actually have those people in the networks, then you got to turn them into real customers. You got to turn them into advertisers. You got to turn them into, participants and keep them there, right? And then you have literally, as John Naughton says, he says you have a license to print money. Once you're there and you own the marketplace, you own the platform, you're printing money. It's very easy. We're starting to see this, for example, this week, Apple Vision Pro, some news came out because they're starting to release the new VR headset that they're working on. And, they've had a few major platforms. I think they've had YouTube and Netflix come out and say that there won't be any proprietary app like a native app to the Apple Vision Pro, because mostly because Apple has is probably ridden the wave of the App Store way too long, and people definitely, a lot of these companies feel like they're not getting a good deal from Apple anymore, and so they really need Apple really needs these companies to really to come in and offer native apps, but they're refusing because of Amazon's abuse of their marketplace, what they've actually done with their software and their platforms. And so you look at that and you're like, wow, okay, well, all of that kind of tells me that eventually things will shake out. It has to, right?
Yeah. No, I've heard the same thing. I mean, even Seth Godin has been saying, look, if we continue this, it is abusive. And we don't think of it immediately in those terms. What we think of it as being is I'm leaning into the algorithm. But as you say, what happens undoubtedly after a while is we are actually just abusing the relationship that we have with customers, potential customers. And I believe in your article, you said, like, what we ultimately have to have, because our human wiring is built this way, is trust. And if we're going in the opposite direction, even if it has the most fanciest, most technical, nomenclature to it, if it's going in the opposite direction of trust, it's eventually going to fail.
I think everything fails, nothing really lasts forever. Everything. And like, I've got this philosophy around, it's a
long view.
It's a framework which thinks through the stages in which companies go in. And, at the early days, you're inventing. Like, at one point, the iPhone was an invention. At one point, programmatic advertising was an invention, right? And you're inventing. There is literally no incentives other than to create. And then there's innovation. The next phase in innovation is, how do you apply this commercially to a problem in order to drive some sort of commercial value? And then once you get past the innovation phase, then you're doing the value capture. You're doing all of that to harvest that.
Harvesting.
And that's where we're at the moment. We're in on third base, so to speak, in the internet, where a lot of these platforms they've well and truly past the innovation stage. They're not inventing, Apple Vision Pro, it's not really a new concept. We've had VR forever. Sure, it's some cool, interesting things, but the iPhone hasn't changed, and people increasingly complain that there's nothing cool anymore in their new Apple keynotes. So like you look at it, you're like, clearly we're really just doing the value extraction at the moment, and that's where we're at. But then the last piece that no one really wants to talk about is entropy. Is this idea that we eventually will degrade and things will get really bad, and the internet will become unusable. And I think that is the natural state of almost everything, right? Societies, governments, companies, everything, your house, everything falls into entropy at some point, right? It goes into a state of disuse. If it's not in our generation, it's in the next generation, right? There's all these famous stories about really wealthy families, and then 3 generations down, they're all poor and they haven't got a cent to their name. It's right. Right. Humanity doesn't have a stabilizing factor. Everything is in flux and everything trends towards entropy. But the beauty of that is that entropy leads to new invention. And each generation that passes on beyond us, think about how can we do better than our our ancestors? How can we stand on the shoulders and learn from their mistakes as they fell into entropy, right?
Or to borrow what you were referring earlier, you mentioned the Renaissance. We must remember that before that was the decadence, right? So the decadence caused the collapse, and the collapse led to a period of wandering, and then the period of wandering led to a Renaissance, and the cycle continues. But I can't help but note that I see this, how attention and how there's such a disparity between a website that is using it and that is berating its users with banners and, oh, you said it was okay, so we can do this thing that, doesn't really make sense for you, but we love it and it grows our numbers. And then, as you say, we get the network effects. That disparity of a website to its users might just be one of those symptoms of that decadence, that, very short hop before we hit decay.
I
think we can end optimistically. We can say that if we are being truly original and we're actually keeping the customer as our highest concern in this process,
Mm.
we may be able to. I like where you ended it. You kind of said, well, maybe it's not a bad thing if we, I'm imagining that you said that we could give our clients permission after they've read our content to go outside for a walk, like that we would give them back boredom, right?
I hope that we embrace boredom. I hope that we can stare at the wall for a little bit, just because good ideas come from the inside,
Yeah.
Like they don't come from seeing what everyone else is doing. And often the breakthroughs are just completely out of left field, and I'd just like to see more of that. I'd love to see more creativity. I'd like to see less MFA sites just burning ad spend and, spinning up content. And, you got all these nasty banners that really don't communicate anything. I'd just love to see more like the internet is is the most beautiful canvas of creativity. And we've stepped away from that. And I feel like as though as marketers, we've got limitless opportunity to create incredible, beautiful experiences that our customers love. And we should drill into that, forget the clicks, build something beautiful, and I think that's worth pointing out.
Right. I mean, yes, limitless, but limitless doesn't mean, turning on a GPT to write tons of blog posts, right? I mean, again, it's just coming down to the fact that we have a choice. We need to see that choice that we have. We need to see the value of our customer, and not play in these, currency arbitrage games, not play into any of those things that would devalue that, because, while it might look nice on a dashboard, it's ultimately really causing damage. And as you say, maybe it's unavoidable. Maybe we just have to ride this out, let the pendulum swing all the way, and then it'll come back. Or maybe in our own little corner of the world, we can work to actually make it better. That's what my hope is. Juan, I'm so glad that you shared the article. I mean, I know we could go on about it. If people wanted to find out more, if they wanted to follow you, now that they can't do it on X, where else would you send them?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love for folks to come and subscribe and join our community at the Martech Weekly. You can go to themartechweekly.com, drop your email address in there, and then we'll send you our free versions of our newsletter. I would love that in order to offer you a community and offer you a space where you can think through some of this. It's really quite important, as I mentioned at the top of this call, that your career's at stake, and thinking seriously with other great folks as part of the TNW community and our editorial work, maybe just be something that would be worthwhile pursuing, taking a view outside of the business for once in a while. So I recommend that. We also have a bunch of great initiatives coming up. Just speaking on community, we have 3 great events in person, roughly 200 people, called the Martech World Forum. So we're bringing together leaders across down here in Australia, Melbourne, San Francisco, and also London this year. And
wow.
We'd love folks to come and join the discussions and think through really seriously about, where their career is going, where their business is going, but more importantly, where the whole industry, the trajectory of the industry and where everything's going as well. So I'd love to see you there at Martech World Forum. You can go to themartechweekly.com/Martech World Forum, and we'd love to see you there as well. Thank you so much for having me. Wonderful conversation.
I enjoyed it as well, Juan. Thank you so much. I know that you gave people a chance to step back so that they can perhaps make their marketing even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.